ancient virus from the past, let me show you the ELK Cloner. The ELK Cloner, or maybe it's the ELK Cloner, I'm just gonna call it the ELK Cloner, is an ancient virus for the Apple II DOS 3.3 operating system. The virus is so ancient, it might have been the first virus for a microcomputer. The virus was created by Rich Skrenta when he was 15 years old in February 1982. That's him much older. But he wrote the virus as a joke when he was 15. You see, young Rich loved to share floppy disks with his friends. So as a practical joke, he wrote this boot sector virus. Pretty sure nobody is gonna accept disks from him after pulling this prank. But still, it's pretty cool to write a boot sector virus as a prank. So, like other boot sector viruses, the virus spread via disks by hiding in the boot sector. The virus would check if there was a signature on the disk. If there were no signature, the virus would infect the disk. Computers in those days would not have any hard drive, so the virus was essentially just a memory resident until the computer was rebooted. People often had two disk drives, so what would happen is that an infected disk in one drive would infect the disk in the other drive. Boot the computer 50 times and you'll get this message: ELK Cloner, the program with personality. It will get on all your disks. It will infiltrate your chips. Yes, it's Cloner. It will stick to you like glue. It will modify your RAM to send in the cloner. Poetry in a virus, that's so 1980s. Essentially, other than the poem, there were no negative side effects to the computer. The virus was pretty benign. But this is why it spread like wildfire, because people didn't realize what was happening. Once you knew that your disk was infected, stopping the virus was pretty simple. You could run the Pressmaster utility and it will rewrite the boot sector and get rid of the virus. Or alternatively, you could run a program to actually write the signature into the disk so that the virus thinks that the disk has already been infected. However, with the lack of antivirus and knowledge that viruses even exist, people just didn't care and they didn't know what was happening when this virus was spreading. All they knew was, once in a while, they'll see a message on their screen and they'll see a poem. How the virus works is as follows. First, a primer on how the boot sequence of the Apple II DOS worked. The computer will boot up with a sequence of bootloaders. The first was bootloader 0, which will load up immediately as it was in ROM. Then bootloader 1 would load, which started from track 0, sector 0 of the first disk. Then, after that, bootloader 2 would load from track 0, sector 1. After bootloader 2 would be DOS and the relocator would be loaded. Diskettes have 35 tracks with 16 256 byte sectors. On the Apple II disk, the first 3 tracks are the bootloaders and DOS. The 17th track contains the VTOC, the volume table of contents. The VTOC did not address the entire disk, so the spare space was used by ELK Cloner. Disks infected with ELK Cloner would have a copy of ELK Cloner in the spare space, a modified copy of DOS, which would transfer control to ELK Cloner, an ELK Cloner loader in the space that would be used by the relocator. When the computer booted up, the bootloaders would load in series. However, in an infected disk, bootloader 2, which should have been DOS and the relocator, would be replaced by the ELK loader. Since it resided in the track that the relocator should have been in, the ELK loader is loaded instead. Once the ELK loader is in memory, it's just a matter of getting DOS to execute it. This was done by executing a program using the run command. The program will hook into load, bload, and catalog. Load and bload are commands to load files. Bload is just binary load. Catalog is the command to view files. When a user executes those commands, unwittingly the ELK Cloner is run. ELK Cloner also hooked into the USR command with its own USR CMD command, which displayed the virus serial number and the number of times the disk had been booted. The virus stored this information in the unused bytes of the VTOC. Pretty ingenious. This was also used when infecting disks. The VTOC would be checked when a disk is inserted, and if it did not have the appropriate signature, then ELK Cloner will know that this disk has not been infected yet. ELK Cloner will then infect this disk. If the signature is there and the serial number is there, then ELK Cloner will know that this disk already had a copy of ELK Cloner. It won't try to infect it a second time. Cleaning up after the virus was pretty simple. All you needed to do was revert the boot sector. People just didn't know that they needed to do it, but if they wanted to just clear the virus from an infected disk, they just had to rewrite the boot sector with the create master command. The virus, for the most part, was pretty benign, but it still represents a milestone in computer science because it was one of the first viruses to be spread from computer to computer via a diskette. Around that time, other viruses also adopted the same technique, especially the brain virus and the stone virus, but it can be argued that this was probably the first boot sector virus that spread like wildfire just using diskettes. Have you seen this virus in the wild? I never have. I don't have an Apple II and I've never actually used an Apple II. But I'll put links in the description below on where you can get the source code for the virus and a technical description of how the virus works. Anyway, a gentle reminder to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and tell me what you think about all these ancient viruses. I love to do more videos on ancient viruses once I get a bit more free time and I can find a bit more technical information about boot sector viruses, especially the ones with complicated assembler. I especially love those ones. So definitely leave a comment in the description below if you would like me to cover any virus that you know of that you can get information online. It's been a pleasure bringing you this information. I am High Voice, signing out.